My name is Maren Kessler. I'm 31, and on the night my baby brother got crowned the family's golden boy, I was the one sitting in the back corner of the country club ballroom in my only blazer, the one with the frayed cuff I kept tucking under so nobody would see. He's 28. They'd just made him a partner. He had the microphone, and somewhere around his second glass of champagne, he looked right at me and told 300 people. Some folks are born to build empires. Others are born to fix the toilets in them. The room laughed. My mother laughed. And then my parents walked up with a leather folio and handed him the deed to a $40 million development on the lake, plus the keys to a new Tahoe, my father's voice cracking with pride as he said, "This is what we raised." Not everyone in this family turned out to be a disappointment. I didn't move. I just sat there with my hands folded until an old man in a gray suit slid into the empty chair beside me, pressed a heavy envelope into my palm, and said low enough that only I could hear, "It's about time they learned what you really are. If you're watching this, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where you are and what time it is there. I want to see how far this one travels, because it took me a long time to say any of it out loud." Let me back up. Every weekday I'm awake at 4:40, not because I want to be, but because the line crew at the Maumee Valley Electric Cooperative starts at 6, and it's a 40-minute drive from my place in a beat-down Ford Ranger that's older than my nephew. I make coffee in the dark. I pull on insulated Carhartts even in October because the bucket truck is cold no matter what the calendar says, and I drive county roads past corn that's either knee-high or stubble, depending on the season. I've been a journeyman line worker for 9 years. I climb poles. I splice 3-phase. I work hot lines 40 feet up with the wind trying to peel me off, and I do it for $51,000 a year, which around here is enough for a one-bedroom apartment over a hardware store and a fridge with leftovers in it and not a whole lot else. You learn things up on a pole that you don't learn anywhere else. You learn that electricity doesn't care who your parents are. You learn that the difference between going home and not going home is sometimes a half-second and a clear head. The guys on my crew are the kind of men who'd give you the gloves off their own hands, and I'd take a bullet for every one of them. That's not a figure of speech where I work. It's just Tuesday. My brother, on the other hand, wakes up whenever his body decides to. He's got a condo downtown in Columbus with a view of the river and a doorman who calls him Sir. He went into private equity straight out of business school, and now he wears suits that cost more than my truck and flies to meetings in cities I've only seen on the weather map. 300 and some thousand a year, plus carry, plus whatever a carry even is. My parents have a group text with him where they post screenshots of every little write-up he gets in some industry newsletter, the kind of thing nobody outside finance has ever read, and they tag him with fire emojis and hearts. I left that group text 8 months ago. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked. Here's the thing they don't know, the thing I never told them. 14 months ago, we had an ice storm roll through in February, the kind that coats every line in an inch of glass and brings poles down like dominoes. We'd been out for 2 days straight, sleeping in shifts in the warming trailer, when a substation feeder arsed over near the county hospital annex. There's a dialysis center attached to that annex, 40-some patients on machines that do not stop just because the grid does. The backup generator there was running, but it was running on fumes, and the resupply truck was stuck behind a jackknifed semi out on Route 6. We were working to bring a parallel feeder online to take the load. My foreman and another guy, Dean, were on the structure when a cracked insulator let go and a phase came swinging. I was the one on the ground at the switch. I didn't think about it. I dropped the load and killed the feeder a beat before that conductor would have found them. And then I got up the structure and pulled Dean back from the edge of the platform, where he'd lost his footing. We rerouted. We got the dialysis center back on stable utility power inside the hour. 43 people on those machines, and not one of them so much as felt a flicker after that. For weeks afterward, the letters came. People I'd never met, in handwriting that shook. One man wrote that his wife had 3 more sessions left in her treatment plan before a transplant came through, and that I'd given him those 3 sessions and then a whole new wife to go with the new kidney. A teenager wrote that her grandfather was on those machines, and she'd drawn me a picture of a lightning bolt with a heart around it. I keep all of it in a steel toolbox under my bed. I've never shown a single piece of it to my family. What would I even say? They'd tell me it was my job. They'd tell me linemen are a dime a dozen, so I just kept it for myself. My aunt found out, though. My Aunt Marlene, my mom's older sister, lives 2 hours south, and she calls me every Sunday like clockwork. She drove up here once with a casserole and made me tell her the whole thing, and at the end of it, she just held my hand across the kitchen table and said, "Honey, don't you ever let those people downstairs in that family of yours make you feel small for being the only one of them worth a damn." I laughed it off. But I think about that line more than I'd admit. The other thing nobody knows. After the storm, the co-op was short on the rescue and arc flash gear that should have been on every truck. The budget had been cut the year before in some board reshuffle. So I took out a loan against my truck and I bought it. 4 sets of arc flash suits, a rescue pole, voltage detectors, the works. About $9,000. I had the co-op log it as an anonymous donation because I didn't want it to look like I was making a point. I paid that loan back $90 at a time from my checks. Never missed one. Even the month my transmission went out and I had to eat ramen for 3 weeks. My aunt is the only living soul who knows that money came from me. So that's the 2 of us. That's the daughter who fixes toilets and the son who builds empires. The invitation came on the heavy cream cardstock my mother loves, with our family crest she had designed off the internet 10 years ago like we're descended from someone. Celebrating Brett's elevation to partner. Family attendance expected. I read it standing at my counter while a frozen dinner spun in the microwave, and I knew exactly what they wanted me there for. They wanted the contrast. They wanted the room to see the success story and then glance over at the cautionary tale in the corner. My aunt told me to go if I wanted but to keep my spine. And the night before, my phone buzzed with a text from my brother himself. "Just don't come tomorrow. It's embarrassing for everyone." I read it twice and set the phone face down and finished my dinner anyway. I went. The country club was done up the way money does things when it wants you to notice. White roses on every table, a string quartet sawing away in the corner, waiters with trays of stuffed mushrooms moving through a crowd of people in tailored everything. I came in a side door in my one blazer and my good jeans, and I felt the looks land on me before I'd even found a seat. My aunt had driven up, bless her, and she waved me over to a table near the back wall and squeezed my arm hard the second I sat down, like she was holding me to the earth. My brother took the little stage like he'd been born on it. He talked about vision. He talked about discipline. He talked about how some people see opportunity and some people see only obstacles. And right about there, his eyes found me in the back, and he smiled and delivered the line about empires and toilets, and the laughter rolled across that ballroom and broke over me like cold water. I stared at the white tablecloth. My aunt's hand closed around my wrist under the table. Then my parents went up. My mother had a velvet box, my father had a folio. He opened it on the podium, and there on the screen behind him bloomed a rendering of the lakeside development, the docks and the townhomes and the marina, all of it glittering. To mark your new chapter, my father announced, his voice booming through the speakers. We are placing the Harbor Point project, all 40 million of it, under your control. Applause. My mother dangled the Tahoe keys so they caught the light. And so you can arrive in style. More applause. Then she leaned into the mic and I watched her do it. I watched her choose the words. We are so proud of you, sweetheart, unlike some people who only ever brought this family grief. The room loved it. A woman 2 tables over in a sequin dress leaned to her husband and stage whispered, "That's the sister, the one who works on the power lines." He chuckled into his drink. My aunt's grip went tight enough to hurt, and then my father reached into his jacket and pulled out a single folded sheet. I knew before he unfolded it. He motioned to me with 2 fingers, the way you'd call a dog. "Marin, come up here, honey. Sign this so it's all clean and official for your brother." The quartet had stopped. The whole room had stopped. I stood up and my legs didn't feel like mine, and I walked that long aisle between the tables with 300 people watching, some of them smirking, most of them just curious to see how the disappointment would behave. The carpet ate the sound of my steps. I could hear my own heart. On the stage, my father held the paper out. It was a disclaimer of interest, a quitclaim, the kind of document that signs away any future claim to the estate and hands everything to my brother immediately, before anything's even settled. My brother stood there with his arms crossed and that little smile. My mother was looking at her own shoes. My father pressed the pen into my hand, and it was cold and heavier than a pen should be, and there was a blank line waiting for my name, and somebody's flashed from the front row. My aunt half rose from her chair at the back. I saw her do it. I gripped that pen so hard my knuckles went white. I lowered it to the paper, and the felt tip touched down, and a little bead of ink bled out and smeared across the side of my thumb. That's when the Sizar opened. He wasn't a big man. 72 if he was a day, in a gray suit and a tie pulled loose, carrying a scuffed leather briefcase that had clearly seen 40 years of use. He walked in without hurry, and the murmur started low and spread fast as people turned to look. My father's face changed. I'd never seen that particular expression on him before. It was the face of a man watching weather come in that he'd told everyone wasn't coming. The old man set his briefcase on an empty table and snapped it open. "Forgive the interruption," he said, and he didn't raise his voice. But somehow it filled the whole room. "My name is Conrad Eldridge. I was your grandmother's attorney for 31 years. My grandmother Pearl, who'd raised my mother and my aunt both, who'd built the original company out of one used backhoe and a handshake, who'd passed away 14 months ago, right around the time of the ice storm, in fact. I hadn't even made it to much of the arrangements, because we'd been out on the lines for a week straight." He drew a thick folder from the briefcase, stamped with a notary's seal. "Pearl Kessler executed this will in my office 16 months ago, the spring before she passed. The original was provided to this family after the funeral, as required by law." He paused and his eyes went to my father, and they stayed there. "It was destroyed, burned in a fireplace, according to sworn statements from 2 members of the household staff who watched it happen and signed affidavits to that effect." The room made a sound like a tide pulling back. My mother said something sharp and quiet to my brother, who shook his head hard. My father's jaw was working. Mr. Eldridge took a tablet out of the case and turned it on, and the screen behind the stage, where the rendering of Harbor Point still glowed, flickered and went dark, and then filled with my grandmother's face. I hadn't seen her in motion since the funeral. She was in her chair by the front window of the old farmhouse, the Afghan she crocheted across her knees, thin and pale, but with those eyes that never missed a thing. The whole ballroom went so silent, I could hear the ice settle in someone's glass. "If you're seeing this," she said, and her voice came through clear despite everything, Then I'm gone and someone has decided my wishes are a suggestion. She almost smiled. I know this family. I know who in it works and who in it talks. My granddaughter Marin has spent her life keeping the lights on for people she'll never meet, and last winter she kept 43 sick people alive through a storm that should have killed half a county. Nobody told me. I found out the way I find out everything, which is by paying attention. She gets all of it. The company, the land, the lake, every dollar. No conditions, no waiting. And to whoever's standing up there right now trying to make her sign something, I see you too. The screen went dark. I don't remember deciding to. I just realized at some point that I'd stopped breathing. My aunt was on her feet at the back, pointing across the whole room at my father. That is my mother's real will, Roy, and you know it, because you watched it burn. The security guys by the entrance shifted and looked to my father for what to do. But he wasn't looking at anybody. He was looking at the old man, and the old man wasn't done. He lifted a certified copy of the document up so the front rows could see the blue ink and the red date stamps. This copy was filed with the probate court the same afternoon the original was signed, he said. It transfers the entire estate, valued at $40 million, to Marin Kessler. It names the reason directly. Because she risked her life to save 43 people in the February storm, and because she has, in your grandmother's words, more character in one hand than the rest of this family has put together. He didn't editorialize on that last part. He just read it. My brother lunged a half step forward. That's fake, he said, too loud, his face going red. That's obviously fake. My father grabbed his arm and yanked him back. Mr. Eldridge reached into the briefcase again, and this time he pulled out a stack of paper, 3 inches thick, bound in red cord, and he dropped it on the table with a thud you could feel in your chest. Since we're all here, he said, let's talk about what's actually true. The top sheet was the incident report from the cooperative, the official one, with the diagrams and the witness statements and my name circled in red. He held it up. This documents the substation event last February, in which this woman manually de-energized a feeder under load to prevent 2 fatalities and restored power to a dialysis facility serving 43 patients. He set it down and lifted the next thing, a fat sheaf of handwritten pages in plastic sleeves. 43 letters, from the people on those machines and their families. He fanned them across the table. There were photographs tucked into some of them, kids, an old man in a recliner, a couple at a wedding, then bank records highlighted, $9,000 in rescue and arc flash equipment donated anonymously to the cooperative after their safety budget was cut. The donation traces through tax filings to Marin Kessler, who took out a personal loan to cover it and never once claimed credit. Then as a certificate, the gold of it catching the chandeliers. The Governor's Award for Valor in Public Utility Service, presented in March. She didn't attend the ceremony. She was working a storm. I stood there on that stage with the smeared pen still in my hand and a glass of water trembling beside the podium where I'd set it down, and every single thing he laid out landed in that room like a stone dropped in still water. Then he turned to a thinner folder, and across the front of it in black marker was my brother's name. Now, Mr. Eldridge said, and his voice didn't change at all, which somehow made it worse. He laid out 3 glossy printouts. My brother at a charity gala holding one of those oversized novelty checks. My brother at a podium with a banner for a children's hospital fund behind him. Your brother was a paid speaker at each of these events. $50,000, total, wired to his personal account inside 2 days of each appearance. The charities, he said, sliding out an invoice, saw none of it after his fees and what he billed as travel. There's an email here where he's negotiating his rate up while promising a donor the money will, and I'm quoting him, change lives. There's another where he declines a follow-up audit. My aunt stood up again, and she pulled a folded piece of notebook paper out of her purse. 2 years ago, she said, holding it high, my niece borrowed $5,000 from me, in cash, for fire extinguishers and a rescue kit the co-op wouldn't fund after one of their cost-cutting meetings. She unfolded it, and it was an IOU in my handwriting, with a column of $90 payments checked off down the side in blue ink. She paid me back every cent, $90 a week, never missed one, even the month her truck broke down. While she pointed the paper at my brother, was pocketing money meant for sick children. My father's face had gone a color I'd never seen on a living person. My mother had both hands at her throat. My brother's fists were clenched at his sides. Somebody in the front row, a man I later learned was one of the firm's outside investors, stood up and said, loud and flat, "Does the partnership committee know about the gala money?" His seatmate was already typing on a phone, and that's when the doors at the back banged open a second time, and a man came in half running, tablet clutched to his chest, tie flapping. Dean Forsyth, the co-op's general manager, and behind him 2 trustees from my grandmother's estate. Forsyth got to the front of the room out of breath and said, "The trust's anti-coercion clause triggered the second he tried to make her sign. It's automatic. The independent trustees just voted." He turned the tablet toward the room, and the screen behind the stage lit up with a wire confirmation, account numbers and timestamps in green. Emergency distribution to Marin Kessler, effective now, and all family access to the estate accounts is frozen pending a forensic audit that starts at 8 tomorrow morning. My father reached for the tablet with both hands. "You can't." Forsythe stepped back out of his reach. "It's already done, Roy. The Harbor Point transfer is void. The vehicle title's been pulled back to the estate. Nobody touches a dollar until the audit clears." The rendering of Harbor Point flickered off the big screen, and a red bank portal banner came up in its place, account suspended, in real time for the whole room to read. My brother made a noise I'd never heard him make and charged at Forsyth, and 2 of the security guys had him by the arms before he'd gone 3 feet. The investor in the front row was on his phone now, walking fast for the exit, saying the word audit over and over. My mother sat down in her chair like her legs had quit and put her face in her hands and started to shake. My father just stood there with his mouth opening and closing, looking from the red screen to his son on the floor, to the old man with the briefcase, and finding nothing to say. My aunt came up onto the stage and wrapped both arms around me, and I could smell the rosewater she's worn my whole life, and she held on like she thought I might float away. I let the pen drop. It rolled across the podium and left one last little streak of ink on that disclaimer they'd wanted me to sign, and then it fell off the edge and onto the floor. "I'm done," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I wasn't talking to anyone in particular. I was talking to all of them. "I don't want anything from any of you. I never did. I just wanted you to look at me once and see something other than a disappointment." I looked at my mother, who wouldn't look up. "I guess Grandma did the looking for you." And then I walked off that stage, and my aunt walked with me, and we went out the same side door I'd come in, and the February cold night air hit my face, and I realized I was crying and laughing at the same time. Here's what happened after, because I know that's the part you want. I didn't keep the lake development. I sold Harbor Point to a builder who actually wanted to build it, and I took that money and the company and I did the thing my grandmother would have done, which is put it to work. There's a training center in our county now, in a converted machine shop with my grandmother's name on the front in steel letters. The Pearl Kessler Center for Utility Safety. We certify line crews from co-ops all over the state. Arc flash training, rescue drills, hotline simulation, the gear every truck should have had all along. free of charge to any small cooperative that can't afford it. The first year we ran the 400 crews through it. Incident rates across the co-ops we served dropped by almost a third. I didn't hold a ribbon cutting. I just unlocked the doors one Monday and let the work start. I kept my job, actually. That surprised everybody. I still climb poles 3 days a week because 40 feet up in the wind is the only place my head's ever been completely quiet. And because the people I'd take a bullet for are still up there, and I'm not about to leave them short a hand. I bought a little house with a porch on a street lined with maples, with a garage I keep my tools in, and a kitchen where my aunt and I make her casserole most Sundays. And watch old movies until one of us falls asleep on the couch. My brother got let go from the firm within the week. For cause, which means no severance, no payout, his name in a footnote of a story about misappropriated charity funds that he'll be explaining for the rest of his career. Last I heard, he's selling cars at a lot out by the interstate, the kind with the inflatable tube man out front, and he avoids the salesmen who used to know him when he was a partner. My parents sold the big house to pay the lawyers and the settlement the charities came after them for, since they'd co-signed on some of it without reading it, the way they never read anything that flattered them. They're in a rental now, a 2-bedroom with thin walls and a parking lot view. My mother left me a voicemail a few months back. I didn't listen to all of it. The part I heard was her saying she'd always known I was special, deep down. I deleted it, not out of cruelty, just because it wasn't true, and I'm done pretending things are true to make other people comfortable. My aunt asked me once, on one of those Sunday nights with the movie playing low, whether I ever wished it had gone differently. Whether I wished they'd seen me before there was a will and a lawyer, and a room full of witnesses to force their hands. I thought about it for a long time. The 43 letters are still in the toolbox under my bed. I read them sometimes the way you'd read a prayer. And I told her the truth, which is that I stopped needing them to see me the day I figured out I could see myself just fine. The lights I keep on were never going to be the ones in their windows. They were always going to be in the windows of people I'll never meet, in a storm, in the middle of the night, who'll go to sleep warm and safe, and never once know my name. That's enough. That was always going to be enough. It just took me 31 years and a folding chair in the back of a country club to believe it.